Welcome back, fellow builders. Today is a double feature. We're going to be taking a look at the first motorized chopper frame that's specifically designed to mount a two-stroke motor. We're also going to be testing for the first time the BT version 2. This double feature comes for a good reason, which we'll explain later in the video. Ensuring that I don't bury a piece of critical information deep in the video where it might be missed by anybody interested in these two products, please note that the Stinger chopper is not compatible with the BT version 2 motor. I mistakenly made the assumption that these two products coming out about the same time would work together and was sorely disappointed when I tried to put them together. The BT version 2 has a proprietary exhaust system compared to traditional two-stroke motors for these bikes. Its exhaust comes out the right side of the motor, which is not compatible with the chopper's left side offset mount. This by itself is no reason to be disappointed with either one of these products. There'll be plenty of room for that later, but I thought I should point it out. BikeBerry has since added a warning to the website for their chopper about its incompatibility with the BT lineup of motors, at least without significant exhaust modifications. Timestamps in the description in case you're only here for one of these two products, but we're going to go ahead and start with the chopper. In case it's not blatantly obvious, the Stinger is a show bike. This is something you build for fun, to show off. Maybe to take to car shows and bike shows or whatever, but this is not a bike that I would expect to ride daily on my way to work. Nearly every gas bike I've ever built has had a specific purpose, whether it's for trail riding, long-range cruising, or practical commutes to work. I'm not a complete stranger to show bike builds, as about a year ago I put a motor on a Swin Stingray, which is a tiny little bike that just barely fit a two-stroke. And as fun as that little bike was, it was not at all practical. I could still use it to go places if I really wanted to, but it was by far the worst option. With the Stinger, we find ourselves in a similar situation for some of the same and some very different reasons. And to be completely honest, the only reason I built the Stinger is because I've had many questions in the past from people asking about chopper build options. And up until now, unless you wanted to fiddle around with your own offset motor mounts, I really never had a good option. And I still don't. The Stinger from BikeBerry is in almost every way just for show. Despite the Stinger having a longer footprint than the Stingray, by a lot, this bike is somehow harder to ride because of how small it is. I'm not oblivious to the fact I'm 6'4" tall, and most bikes are small on me, but I managed to make them work and I've just gotten used to it. But this one is really pushing the limits. I don't know what younger riders they expect to be able to shell out $700 for a frame, but their target market for this bike is confusing. As for adults, I just don't see it working. The tiny seat cradles my bottom like an adult diaper, and the handlebars had to be slammed all the way forward into an odd position so they wouldn't hit me in the chest when I wanted to turn, or at the very least have my elbows sticking out like chicken wings. Although you don't do much pedaling on a gas-powered bike, you still occasionally need to help it from a dead stop, where you'll find yourself playing whack-a-mole with your kneecaps every time. I'm sure that the manly man's man with welding skill, time, and extra energy could do modifications to this frame to make it more usable. I'm only discussing how it comes out of the box. For new builders who might be wondering what some of the nuances are about chopper builds which make them more difficult to build on, it's mainly the rear tire. Because it's a fat tire, it forces you to offset the motor for chain alignment. Otherwise, on a traditional bike, the chain would just rub on the tire. This also depends on the position of the crankset and the angle of the seat tube. These two-stroke motors have a specific mounting pattern to work on a general variety of bikes, but chopper builds have odd angles which don't line up with the mounting solution. Up until this point, most builders would either fabricate their own or purchase a custom offset motor mount to get around this issue. What BikeBerry has done with the Stinger is incorporated two offset standoffs for mounting the motor. At a glance, this solution works fine, but I don't know how much testing actually went into using it. Positioning of the motor mount standoffs is pretty much spot on. I have near perfect chain alignment to the rear sprocket with plenty of clearance so the chain doesn't rub on the tire or the frame. But sadly, this solution has some rather extreme drawbacks, and that's in the form of vibration. Like a lot of vibration. Whew, I'm not gonna lie, that was an awful ride. That was just about one of the worst bikes I've ever ridden. Oh my God, this thing is terrifying. On traditional motorized bike builds, vibration is always an issue that we're battling, to some degree, but it's manageable. With those traditional builds, you're mounting the motor to the seat tube and the down tube, which are supported as a full triangle. But this isn't. It's supported only at the bottom, causing the vibrations to be amplified even more. During my testing, I noted two very important things that should be done while building your own to ensure these standoffs don't crack off the frame immediately. Though how much time this will actually buy you, I can't say, but these are definitely going to be an issue. One, I made the mistake of utilizing the universal mounting plate on my motor. There was really no reason for me to do this other than it was already on the motor, and I didn't think to take it off because I didn't realize how big of an issue this was going to be. You want the motor to be mounted as low and flush as possible so it doesn't amplify the vibrations quite as much. My motor sits a bit high because of the universal plate, and really with most modern motors using 8mm mounting studs and the wider front mount, there's really no reason for this plate to be on there at all. And the second aspect of the building process, which should help buy you some time, is ensuring that when mounting your motor, you're not pulling these two standoffs together as you tighten the bolts. This comes down to flush mounting the motor, ensuring that both the front and rear mounting points have as much contact as possible before you tighten the bolts. I've opted to leave the rear fender off of this bike for a couple of reasons, one of which is my own fault. The universal mounting plate on the motor raises the chain line just enough to cause it to rub on the fender, which won't be an issue for most of you who actually build it properly. But second, the vibrations were causing this thing to shake around so much that it was making me nervous. With it being a show bike, that's not a big deal, but if you do somehow find yourself riding this quite often, Those vibrations can cause these fenders to snap off and get sucked in between the tire and the frame, so just be careful if you're going to ride it a lot. There are some things on this frame which I can appreciate, and anybody who does find themselves in a situation where you can modify this might make it a good platform. It's an all-steel frame, and it has thick horizontal rear dropouts. This is something which should be on pretty much any motorized bike frame, if possible, because it makes chain tension adjustments much easier, so that is appreciated. And with them being thick steel, they won't spread open when you're tightening down your rear wheel. I can't say how necessary it was for them to place a raised platform on the frame for mounting the gas tank, but it does make mounting the tank a lot easier, faster, and more convenient. I just wish it was secured a bit better, as it looks like this rear mount would just snap off if you leaned on the tank. The strength and integrity of the frame itself while riding feels good. It doesn't feel like this bike's just gonna snap in half, other than the motor mounts being an issue. You should survive. Two things I wish the bike would have included to show they were indeed trying to cater to their intended market: a dual pull brake lever to make things more convenient and less cluttered up on the handlebars, and a thumb throttle so I could actually utilize the grips that come with the bike. Because it's nearly impossible for me to give you a reliable first impressions of a bike that's really difficult to ride, I'm gonna end it here. The Stinger could certainly be a good starting platform for somebody who wants to get into deep custom builds and has the means to do so. And although the build is relatively simple, is set up well for putting a motor on it, there's simply going to be too many issues for somebody who's looking for a plug-and-play option with no further modifications. Assuming you can get around the size restraints of this bike and make it rideable, the motor mounts are where I see the biggest issue arising. These don't seem like they're going to hold up very well to the vibration induced from the motor. And where I'd love to give you more details about the bike, I simply found it to be unrideable for me personally. At the very least, I just wanted to let people know what they're getting into if this is a bike they really want to get. On to the BT version 2. If you'd like a closer look at this motor with a little bit of extra information, I'll have a link in the description to where we unboxed it and took a look at it on the bench. What you're seeing here is my first ride on the BT V2. Out of the box performance is pretty gutless, but I've noticed that tends to be the case with a lot of iron sleeve cylinders. I'll need a few more weeks of riding the bike and breaking it in to tell you for sure if this has any improvements over something like a YD100. Over the course of the next few weeks, I'll be taking this back and forth to work to help break in the motor, and then I'll be taking it on a long-range endurance ride, where I'll be looking for things like reliability, fuel efficiency, and performance. The motor itself is probably about the most robust I've seen so far, and the build process was very easy compared to others. With the V2 having the best cooling solution I've seen on any kit so far, and an integrated reed valve, it gives the motor a substantial look, a bigger footprint. Not such that it gets in the way of anything or makes the build more difficult, just that it makes the build look meaner, so hopefully after braking, this motor will have the grunt to back up its looks. And thanks to BikeBerry actually offering a top-end replacement for this motor, the head, the cylinder, piston, so on, you could actually justify doing some port work to yours, and if you mess it up, well, at least you have a replacement. It's not exactly a cheap replacement, but the option's there nonetheless. One thing I hope BikeBerry gets on top of as soon as possible is offering a plug-and-play exhaust adapter for the BT series of motors, and one that's well thought out that doesn't give a massive restriction. Yes, if I really wanted to, I could pull out the welder and try and hack something together to put a pipe on this motor, but plug-and-play options are just so convenient and easy to do when you don't have a lot of time. I do appreciate the degree of freedom the adjustable exhaust on the BT motors gives you for different builds and different positions, but when you're stuck with only this one pipe, it doesn't seem to make up for that freedom. motor itself fired right up and hasn't given me any issues, only a top speed of 32 miles an hour at the moment on a 36.2 sprocket with 26-inch wheels, but I suspect that's going to go up. Only time will tell. I'll wait until after break-in before I make my decision, but they've included the Bafang carburetor with the V2. Out of the box performance, these carburetors run great, at least for me personally, but the jets are tricky to find, and in the past I've had problems with a lot of these leaking, especially if they've gone unused for a couple of months. This might be an issue that's been solved, or not a problem for somebody who plans on riding their bike every week. Just noting it. If after break-in this feels like it could use some retuning, I'll go ahead and put an NT speed on here because I've got endless jets for that carburetor. Two good things I've noticed about this motor during my first ride is, first, it's quiet. Compared to my other two-stroke kits, it's really quiet. And second, it's smooth. This is one of the smoothest running motors I've built so far, so the balance must be pretty spot on. So where do we sit right now with BikeBerry? Well, for the Stinger, in my opinion, that bike is a bust. With the exception of those who can do some pretty severe custom modifications, or someone who simply wants a show bike to do some slow cruising on occasion, it's not going to find much use for anyone else. As for the BT version 2, the jury's still out on its stock configuration. If after break-in and our endurance ride this motor still doesn't have the grunt we desire, I'm gonna pull it out of the motor, whether it likes it or not. Whether that involves port work, tuning the carb, decking the head, and making my own custom exhaust adapter, we're gonna get there. This motor simply has too many things good going for it to let it fly under the radar. It vastly improved cooling, integrated reed valve, and a robust build that runs really smooth. I don't see why not. So I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.